Okay, calling the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and Labor and Technology to order. This morning, the committee will hear from the Department of Human Resources and the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, who will present their biennial budget requests. So first, we'll begin with Department of Human Resources. Good morning.
Good morning. Aloha and good morning,
Aloha.
Chair Dela Cruz, Chair Moriwaki, and members of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means and Senate Committee on Labor and Technology. My name is Brenna Hashimoto, and I'm the newly appointed Director of the Department of Human Resources Development, or DHERD as it's known. Before I proceed with our budget presentation, I'd like to introduce the members of the DHERD team here with me today. First of all, I think you all know Representative Ryan Yamani, who's our Deputy Director. Can you come up and
Goodness. Good luck.
Eric Nita, who is our Labor Relations Division Administrator. Jennifer Moriwaki on the end, or sorry, Jennifer Mori-Kilby. She's our Employee Claims Division Administrator. Raynell Lee, who's sitting next to her, is our Employee Relations Division Administrator. Jennifer Green, right behind me, is our Employee Staffing Administrator. And next to her is Corey Dido, an Employee Staffing Supervisor. First, I'd like to say that I'm excited to be part of Team Green, and I share the governor's vision for the state of Hawaii, including a robust human resources program that attracts and retains high-quality talent. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to utilize my 30 years of human resources experience to collaborate with the legislature to effectuate real progress in the department. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Department of Human Resources Development and my plans and vision for leading and supporting the HR needs of the executive branch. In that vein, before I talk about our budget requests, I'd like to take a moment to share my top priorities. First of all, is to fill DHERD's vacant positions. We're not unique in that we have a considerable number of vacancies, approximately 25 out of our 90 total budgeted positions. And we need to fill those positions so that we can get on with the work that's required of us. We currently have too many vacant positions in our staffing and claims divisions, which is hampering our ability to be responsive. We also recently lost our ASO and her secretary to retirement, on top of a long-standing HR specialist vacancy in our ASO office. She's basically the HR for HR. Secondly, we need to modernize the way in which we conduct recruitment. I'm sure you've heard from many other departments regarding their struggles to fill their vacant positions. Frankly, we need to do more than rely on our current post and pray method, which is basically posting a job and praying that the right candidate applies. Instead, we need to move forward with a more modern approach, or many approaches, to recruitment that includes the use of employment-based social media and networking platforms, such as LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter. And due to the current labor market, we need to be reaching out to potential candidates that may not be looking for work. I would also like to dedicate resources to stand up a team of recruiters, each dedicated to a specialized field or industry, such as law enforcement, healthcare, social services, administrative jobs, and blue-collar jobs, and have them work closely with the corresponding state departments where those jobs reside. And to cultivate relationships with likely sources of talent, such as UH Manoa, the community colleges, other trade schools, high schools. There's really no source of talent that we should not be pursuing. I'd also like to expand the use of the WIKI hire model, which empowers motivated applicants and managers to accelerate the interview and selection process. My most recent position in HR was as the departmental HR officer for the Department of Human Services. And there, my team collaborated with DHERD to launch the first WIKI hire program to support the Child Welfare Services branch. I believe there are many more opportunities to implement the WIKI hire model throughout the state. Lastly, we can't overlook the value of in-person traditional recruitment strategies, such as job fairs. I'd like DHER to hold quarterly job fairs, both in person and or virtually, where we can promote the benefits of public service on a personal level and work with individual applicants and job seekers to match them with opportunities throughout the state. Another one of the must-do projects is the transition to an electronic workers' compensation claims management system. The funds for the software as a service were appropriated last session, and it's incumbent upon DHER to find the personnel resources to initiate and manage that transition. In terms of modernization, I would like to see the state move from a paper-based performance management system to an electronic paperless system. And a little further down the road, I'd like to conduct a deep dive into the issues around employee retention. It doesn't make much sense if we're recruiting and we can't keep the employees. So we need to figure out why our employees are leaving state government. I have several thoughts on that topic, which I'll save for another day. As you can tell, I could go on and on about my priorities and plans, but we're here today to talk about the 2 budget requests that were submitted in keeping with the steady state approach. First, for HRD 102, we asked for an additional 4.305 million in FY24 and an additional 5.225 million for FY25 to support the increasing costs associated with managing workers' compensation claims for the executive branch. And our second request, also for HRD 102, is the addition of roughly 75,000 in FY24 and roughly 80,000 for FY25 to support the full funding for 2 HR specialist positions that were authorized last session. Although not included in our steady state budget requests, I plan to work with Governor Green and Director Salaveria to identify and vet several other proposals that would support our efforts to stabilize DHER and to modernize the state's human resources program. As I mentioned earlier, I'm looking forward to working with all of you, as well as the other directors, to effectuate positive changes throughout DHER and the executive branch. I'm confident that each modest investment in DHER has the potential for outsized impact on the entire state executive branch. Thank you for your time and attention, and my team and I are here and available to answer any specific questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator Keith Agorad.
Yesterday, we had a briefing from Department of Hawai'i and Homelands, and they had 66 vacancies, and they chose to fill or seek to fill only 20 of them because they felt that DHER was incapable of providing this. And so they basically are filling only a third of their vacancies when they have a deadline to spend $600 million to put more people from the wait list on Hawaiian Homes properties. So what is it that you're going to do to make sure that you don't have the departments having to pick or choose not to try to fill the positions that they have? Assuming, of course, that this governor allows them to fill.
Well, okay, so it's a complex question in terms of how recruitment.
I mean, you just said you just came from one of the largest departments.
We need to fill our vacancies, frankly. We need to fill, we have approximately 7
How long is that going
vacancies.
to take for you then? So
All
we
of
can
our
gauge
positions
how
are
long-
currently under
How long
recruitment.
before Hawaiian Homes and other departments that have important vacancies can be filled as well? Can you delegate some of that authority to them?
We
Come up
can.
with this?
We have many classes of work which are currently delegated to other departments. They can conduct their own open competitive recruitments. If they're interested, we are certainly willing to work with them on identifying classes of work that they want to take over the recruitment for. In terms of the responsibility for DHER, we need to beef up the staffing in our own staffing area so that we can support the other departments.
All right. So
And those
how long-
positions are currently under recruitment. I can't answer that specifically. We're trying as best we can with the resources that we have to fill those positions. They're all under recruitment. We have Jennifer started last week. She's our new division administrator.
You can't
so-
just steal people like yourself from the other departments.
We can, but that just creates another hookah somewhere else. So, there's
But if it
an
starts
awful
with you,
lot of that.
you basically are saying it starts with your department though, so. if
We
you
can, but
can't
they
help
have to
them-
come, they have to come willingly And so, you
Well,
know,
no, I mean, the governor can delegate them, can't they? Can
I'm not sure that that's the answer. The recruitment staff in the departments are an important part of this piece. They do recruitment activities for their own department, promotional opportunities, and to a large extent, there are some departments which have a lot of recruitments that go, open competitive recruitments, outside external recruitments that are conducted by the
All
departments
right, so
themselves.
when we budget the new positions, we usually do 6-month delay in hiring. So the assumption being that you're not gonna fill these positions, get the descriptions done and actually start the recruitment for another 4, 5, 6 months. So what are we looking at? A year before the Green administration gets going and addressing this? I mean, this is not new. I mean, the prior administration made all sorts of promises about what they were gonna do to move this forward, and they had a whole damn pandemic to deal with this. I mean, when nothing else was happening.
Well, largely during that time, you know, position recruitment was frozen. So there was not an opportunity to capitalize on
Oh,
some of the
but to
unemployment.
work on the mechanisms? I don't understand. I mean, there wasn't any recruitment, but they certainly could have been working on improving the process. I mean, you guys worked on the wiki thing, right?
Yes. Yes, and the wiki has been expanded to other groups, other jobs. We do wiki now for office assistants because there are an awful lot of office assistant vacancies in state departments that need filling.
Yeah, but that was at the urging of the legislature, not the department.
I've been in the department for a month, so I can't speak to, you know, what happened under the prior administration, but I think there are certainly enough opportunities to expand wiki, but that does shift some of the burden to the department. So they have to be ready and willing and capable of taking on that additional responsibility. It shifts it to not necessarily only to the HR offices as well. At child welfare services, the actual supervisors, you know, took the calls from applicants and scheduled interviews. So they need to be available to conduct those interviews. They have to be willing to put in the time to take those calls and to sell their program. So it's not necessarily just my decision to designate something wiki. It has to be a cooperative effort between our department and the receiving department.
So why don't you delegate your deputy to work on something like this with all the other departments? So at least we know that he's doing something.
Take that under advisement.
But seriously, there's no sense in us adding positions if they don't do wiki. I mean, there's no guarantee that they're going to fill within the year. I think every department should start doing wiki if they want us to consider adding positions
If you're talking about positions in
every
Yeah.
department.
You know, there are certain types of jobs that are conducive to wiki, but it's not necessarily the only way.
No,
to
we
conduct
get that,
recruitment.
but to not have wiki at all, because there are jobs that could be used, could go through wiki.
Certainly.
Just as a follow on, how right now our budgetary process is that there's a 6-month delay in hiring. How can you reduce that? Because that's what we're talking about, is that we've got so many vacancies. I see like 4,000 vacancies across the state. And how are we going to reduce that number to get the departments fully staffed in a faster than a 6-month delay in hiring mode?
Well, the positions that are existing now, obviously there's no 6-month delay. And a lot of that, you know, we really need to look at the entire process.
I think you mean there shouldn't be a 6-month delay.
There shouldn't be a 6-month
But that
delay.
doesn't mean there isn't a delay.
You know, for most departments, they conduct an internal recruitment first, because for many jobs, it's a promotional opportunity for their own internal employees. So they post the job internally. If they have applicants, they interview, they make a determination of selection or not non-selection, and then they come to DHERD after they're unsuccessful filling it internally. So we're not the starting point of the recruitment process. You know, there may be many reasons why they determine not to fill a particular job, but I can tell you our statistics show that only about 40% of vacancies are in our pipeline. So that means the other 60% are either not under recruitment or they're under this the recruitment at the department level, or it's a delegated class where the departments conduct the recruitment.
Chair, question. Can you tell us what that process is? And from the time that I need a position as a program administrator, all the way to I get that person on board so that we can see where is it? What does the department do? What do you do? And I know there's classification if it's a new position, but can you give us some kind of timeline? And where then can we reduce the time in terms of getting people on board? Because we need to fill these vacancies quickly.
Well, I think it varies a lot. I mean, typically, if you talk about the recruitment process starting after the job is classified, so you have a position.
No, you don't have to,
Not right now, but just
Oh,
submit it.
Sure, yes, of course.
unless you abbreviated the timeline already.
We can get really far down in the weeds if we want.
Okay, Senator Kim.
Thank you. First of all, you mentioned you have 20 vacancies,
Closer to 25.
25 vacancies. Where is that vacancy list in your report? I see one that has 4 pages of vacancies. That I assume that's not your department. I'm confused.
I believe
But
it's
you said-
table 11, but that's a little bit old. I got an updated report this morning. And we had 25 vacancies.
Can you provide that? Because I only see the one from starting from page 13.
Page 19 is our vacancy report as of November 30th.
Okay, I can go ahead and find that. So the University of Hawaii has some similar issues that I've been made aware of. So they do an internal search, but positions like security officers, they're not able to fill internally because they're so short of these security officers. And so then they said they're going to go to DHERD and it might take another year before they even get it posted. I don't understand why these things will take so long.
I believe University Security Officer is one class of work that is delegated to UH to conduct recruitment.
Yes, but if they don't, well, the community colleges as well?
I spent a fair amount of time at UH, but it's been a while. I don't
I know
believe the
Manoa
community
does its
colleges
own.
had their own security officers at the time I was there. They contracted out for security.
Yes, and now they want to have the security officers.
Because of Kono.
Okay.
Yes, and we provided positions, some position counts, and they're trying to fill it because they need it. And so they're having difficulty in filling it. And from my understanding is that they anticipate that once it gets to DHERD, because they're going to go through the rigmarole of trying to from within. And then when that is exhausted, they're going to come to you guys. And then they're saying that it's going to take, I'm not sure how long for you to post it and get through it. And anyway, it's just concerning.
I believe, I have a list of all the delegated classes. It's 4 pages long. And as of September 3rd,
Can you
2019,
just share
they're
all of that
delegated.
with us?
Sure.
So even the updated vacancy
Yeah,
chart,
vacancy.
if you can send that over, so we
Certainly.
have the one dated November 30.
Certainly. So as of 2019, the university is delegated the responsibility for open competitive recruitment for university security officer 1,
Or-
2, and 3.
Including
So it doesn't come to DHERD, in other words.
community colleges.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna follow up because they told me that. Okay, otherwise.
You know, so on the November vacancy chart, you have an 89-day hire 3 times. Same person 3 times. Human resource assistant 3. SR 9.
Sorry, what was the question again?
No, why do you have it 3 times? Why not just hire the person? Why are you renewing 89-day 3 times?
I don't know specifically, but perhaps that particular class of work was not under recruitment at the time.
No, it is. It's here. It says it is. Authority to hire, but it's occupied 89-day hire.
Sorry, which position number are you referring to?
Okay, if you just look at the chart that you gave us,
Are we talking about
you look
Page
at your
19.
vacancy chart, table 11.
table 11?
if you,
Oh, I see, I see. what
you
you-
have to,
okay.
you have to work with what you gave us. We don't know what you have.
Oh. Okay. My staff tells me it was a position in workers' comp that was particularly difficult to fill. I think we're
Yeah,
in
but
the
for us, every
process.
time we go to 3, 4, 5 times on 89-day, that's a red flag for us.
Yes, understood. I believe that person is in the pipeline to become a regular probationary employee.
Okay, so how much is there a difference between what you have and what we have in the chart, table 11?
I can tell you from the most recent information that I have, we have 7 vacancies in our staffing division.
Okay, if someone can give it to our staff so we can, make
I'll send it
copies.
to you electronically as soon as
No,
I
we're
get
gonna-
back to my
we're
office.
gonna send it now so we can ask you questions
Oh, okay,
about it.
sure.
So if you have new information, we expect to receive it so we can review it during this info briefing.
I got it this morning about 10 minutes before I
Okay,
came,
if
so
not, we can recess and you can come back when you're prepared.
certainly.
Can I just follow up real quick? So on this vacancy list, you expect to fill everything by 3/1/2023? Because most of it says 3/1/2023, and there's a few at 5 of them at 4/1/2023, a couple at 2/1. You do it in a month, in 2 months?
They're all under recruitment. That's our goal.
How long does it normally take under recruitment?
It depends. Some of the positions are more challenging than others, but we're doing our darndest to beat the bushes and
Okay.
fill the positions.
I just get irritated when you list, you're gonna fill it by a certain date, and next year come and the position is still open and you put a fill date, it's just so we don't take the positions. And that's been done in many departments where they keep, and I go back and I look
Yeah.
at the year before and I compare it and I see they told me they're gonna do it in 2022, 2023 is still vacant. I go back a year before, it was vacant for 3 years. So, note that I do go back.
Yeah,
and
she
I do
does.
Check every
Okay.
year and I look and see if you folks are not giving us a true fill date, then that's problematic.
Yeah, because often departments will do that, not fill it, use the money for current expenses.
Exactly.
So that's really disingenuous.
Operation.
Yeah,
So-
or for the 10% restrictions.
Yeah. So we will look at this again next year and see which ones you didn't fill.
So just for clarification, these 20 some odd positions, they're all under recruitment and you've got money for it. And so you're going to fill these. So your budget request is only for 2 classification positions and that's it additionally to this.
Yes.
So
that-
you're going to fill all of these 25 positions.
Yes, that's our goal.
Okay, so if you want the 2, you should fill all the
Right.
vacancies by March.
But the 2 positions are filled, I believe. Yes, the 2 positions are filled.
That you want?
No, the 2 positions that we're asking for the full year funding,
Yeah.
we only received half year funding and those
Yeah.
positions have been filled.
So if you want the money for those, fill the vacancies by March.
We're trying our best to fill them.
So it's up to you.
And those 2 positions are which ones? Are they human services tech or human resources?
They are human resources specialist ones. I don't believe they're on the list because they are recently filled. Actually, they're 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 4, 4, 7, 7.
But they're all ones.
Yes, they're filled as human resources specialist 1.
I can feel them.
Let me ask another 9 questions. That I can. So if, are you utilizing remote working in your department, and how conducive is remote working to the activities of your department?
Yes, we are. We, most of our employees are on a hybrid situation, or the ones that are teleworking are in the office a number of days and teleworking a couple of days a week. And we do have 2 areas that are not currently teleworking just because of we need them in the office, and those are our staffing and our employee claims divisions. those folks are in the office.
So
every day
is there
right now.
it's a renegotiated policy in place now then?
It is under, but it's undergoing ratification with the membership
Um,
at HGA.
was just HGA?
Yes.
Are you doing the same thing? Well, I guess you're really not gonna be working, right?
I think the plan is to propose a remote work option because there is a very, very narrow,
Wait, how would you do
use
that
of
for janitors?
Well, no, but-
It's not conducive for janitors, certainly, but there is one very small group of employees that could benefit from a telework option. And so my understanding is that has been discussed with UPW about offering it to that group.
And then telework options for the other jurisdictions that have been delegated, university. DOE is covered by this agreement or not?
I believe not, no.
Following up on the remote, the telework, there was, as I understood, your predecessor was working with the unions to come up with a statewide policy.
Yes.
The issue is, do we have a policy? And there were some standards and requirements so that not anybody could just stay at home and work. There would be some way of approvals and looking at performance and the requirements of performance. So if that is the policy and you don't have it yet in place, or if it's not approved and departments are already doing it, what kind of oversight do you have as HRD director to look at these policies that are consistent applied across departments?
Okay, so the state has a longstanding telework agreement and guidelines in place back from 2011. So we've always had the option to telework. It just wasn't used very often until COVID. And then many offices began to use telework. And so that option has always been there. It was rather prescriptive and it was onerous in order to get approval to telework.
Well, that's not a bad thing though.
Not necessarily, but it discouraged managers from even considering it. So when COVID hit, there was an emergency telework option, which basically waived the requirement to be in the office at all. It allowed for full-time telework, in other words, and it allowed individuals who perhaps had childcare or elder care issues at home to telework. Because previously under the agreement, if you had children at home or you were a caregiver, you did not have the option to telework. So it waived those two
But how do you
requirements.
reconcile the fact that they're going to be caregiving during the same time they're working?
Yeah, they're
Well-
not supposed to.
Not that has been addressed in the new telework agreement. They have to have alternate care. They can still telework, but they do have to have someone else available at home that's caring for the children or caring for
And how do
the
you,
others.
how do you ensure that?
Well,
how do you prove that?
it has to be good communication. There is an application that the employee would fill out. They would certify what the situation is. They would work for this with the
And
supervisor.
who monitors?
It would be incumbent upon the supervisor and the manager to make sure that the employee remains productive.
But how do you do that?
trained the supervisors? Because I'm sure they're kind of willy-nilly, you know, they're doing whatever they're doing and they don't supervise when they're in the office. So are you doing some training? So when they're remote, it's
So-
even more important.
So my team has planned to go out and educate the HR
No,
officers. We have a meeting with
can
them
you
next week.
present to the committee what you train the managers on?
So we won't be training managers directly. We'll be training the trainers, basically. We'll be educating
we
the
would like to
HR
see that.
offices. And they in turn will be training and
Because what-
presenting it to their
Because in
supervisors.
our meeting with DCCA yesterday, there's no way they can tell, there's no metrics on deliverables and outcomes. So how do you know
Right,
there's work
right.
being done at home if there's nothing to,
We would highly encourage the
deliverables.
supervisor. That's
no,
part
not
of the.
encourage, it has to be mandated, encouraged.
Well, it's part of the process and reviewing to make sure.
You
that
know
the
what,
work
you
is
guys,
suitable
this
for
is
telework.
taxpayer dollars. Residents are expecting services. You gotta ensure that.
Understood.
We get calls, no one picking up from at the office. They went to the office, nobody's there. We visited DCCA, nobody in the office.
You're still out.
That was service providers, people come into the office, you have to have at least a person.
This is serious.
I can tell you that the telework guidelines it's a tool, but it requires both.
But you shouldn't
commitment from
allow it
supervisors.
if there's no deliverables or outcomes on how you can monitor the telework to make sure that there's productivity.
It requires approval of the department. It doesn't come to DHERD for
That
approval.
approval and your approval of the department has to be that there's going to be a way you can track productivity.
We'll take a look at the guidelines to ensure that there's accountability built in.
Do you require a report from the departments as to who's teleworking, what is being teleworked? So that you can, again, across the board, see what the departments are doing, because this is an important policy as we go forward, what we learned from the pandemic, and it is a useful tool, but it has to be done in a way that we still have productive employees
Absolutely.
at home.
A good example is the University of Hawaii, and they get the approval by the president. He allowed a chancellor to be off for a year taking care of a sick mom. I mean, and they list it down, and I don't know what the recourse is. I don't know who's accountable or who can hold the president accountable on that. There's another one in their finance office, and the father was taking care of a sick child. And, we don't want to sound like, we're not compassionate, but as the policy says, they need to have care already, and that they also have family leave. There's also sick leave. There's other kinds of leaves they can take instead of being given the opportunity to work remotely and get paid. And I don't know how a chancellor can oversee their department by doing that. But then the other employees see that and they don't feel that that's fair. So there's a morale problem, and then they all want to do it. So it's a bad example, and somebody's got to hold them accountable. And I know UH wants to be exempt from these policies because they want to make their own, but then it's the whim of the president. And if he likes them, then he gives it to them. I mean, that's crazy. And the students are paying it on the backs of their tuitions. And that's why we wonder why the tuitions, we have all this debt that the president got to relieve these students from their debt.
Telework is really intended for, high functioning, high performing employees that need little supervision, that are self-starters that can execute their jobs without being present.
Yeah.
It's not conducive to all situations and all employees.
No, I
and
think
it
we
needs to be used
understand that,
selectively.
but you are not telling us in which situation it is applicable and which one it isn't. There's no clear delineation.
That's really for department directors and managers to determine what's feasible and what's appropriate for
If
their
they've been
individual
trained
work
properly
sites.
to determine that.
Sorry,
If they've been trained properly to determine that. A new person coming in this in a job, they may not know. So they allow the telework and then we don't have productivity.
well, part of our responsibility moving forward, once the agreement is signed, is to educate, and we intend to do that. We'll be meeting next week with the HR officers. I'll be covering the new program with cabinet members. So I have no doubt that they're going to take it seriously and their responsibilities seriously.
At this point, the policy is still confidential until ratification, or will we get a copy of the policy once it's ratified?
Yes, we can provide that. Should be next week.
Okay, I'm gonna call a recess real quick. Oh, you had a quick question?
Just one point. Good example, perhaps you should look at other industries within downtown Honolulu. As an example, HMSA in the reorganization allows their employees to telework. My granddaughter is at my condo and she's on it every day. And I asked her, I was curious, are they monitoring you? Are you doing your work? She has no children, but she says, yes. They can tell you if you're on electronically and they monitor you. So just to say that there is something out there that will be of benefit. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna recess. reconvening.
All right, so Director, I think I heard you say you were thinking about rolling this out, the telework policy, assuming ratification in February sometime. Before that happens, I think we would probably want to have a briefing to see how, I think at that point, the policy will be public, and so we can actually ask all the questions that we have about how it's going to be implemented, making sure that there's going to be some enforcement and monitoring, that there's productivity, and that it's not just being completely free use of telework, and that there's proper training and following of the guidelines. And that would, so as soon as you can tell us when you were thinking about rolling this out, then we could probably schedule that.
Yeah. We
Certainly.
can do a
So-
caucus.
So the temporary emergency telework agreement that we have in place with the union, it's been extended for the last year. It technically expires the first week of February. I don't think we're going to be prepared and have everyone trained and knowledgeable about the new telework guidelines before that. So our plan is to approach the union to extend that emergency telework agreement just until the end of February, so that that will give us an opportunity to provide adequate training to departments on how to implement the new telework guidelines moving forward.
And
So
I know,
during that
I
time
think
would
you're
be
probably
good.
gonna be training the HR people from the department.
Yes.
But I think we'd want to be assured that the HR people will be training their supervisors.
Yes, so it'll be a train the trainer. I can also do a training for the cabinet members so that they're aware of the ins and outs of telework and when it's most appropriate and when it's not appropriate.
Instead of extending till the end of February, why not just everybody come back
Well, for some
for
folks,
that 1 month?
it could be disruptive. A lot of folks have basically their whole office set up at a remote location currently, so to have them come back and then go back out again may not be the best approach in terms of moving forward. I think just a few weeks of transition would allow for both supervisors and employees to adjust to the new guidelines and to confirm and ensure that the situation warrants.
Okay, but
continued telework.
between now and the briefing, we would request though, and you can provide this to the chair. If you could give us data on how many positions, the type of positions that are teleworking currently in the departments.
I believe you folks have already requested that information from the departments, and I think it's due today. So they should be providing that information to you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Different subject.
yeah, go ahead, Senator.
Oh, yeah.
Please.
My subject
Oh.
would be a new subject.
Yeah, go ahead.
On vacancies. Okay. Previously, we've had issues with filling vacancies, names that are reported to the departments for choices. I guess the submittal of the final, application process that you go through. During one of the years that we had problems with the hiring of engineers for DOT, and it was problematic because engineers are a different classification of, as an example, the clerks. And so we were having difficulty receiving or getting names to fill the positions. But what occurred was that because of the delays, so what we implemented, DHERD implemented a program where the names of engineers, an example, before it's even gone through your process, that it would involve the agency, like whoever is in charge of engineers, to make sure that those names can be accepted, or see how immediately you can process that particular application process. The problem that happened was that because the private sector was picking up our engineers before, so an applicant would come in for the state job, but because of the delays, the private sector were picking up the engineers. So our suggestion, interestingly, CTAR, I did previously to coming here a couple of weeks ago as the new senator for the district. We're trying to implement our agriculture program. So I visited with CTAR on the ag, looking at improving our ag systems within CTAR. Interestingly, Hawaii Island had a vacancy for the ag farm manager works quite a long time. The outgoing farm manager who retired December tells me he knows of 14 applications that went to our offices, wherever it goes. By the time he got the names and the administration looked at it, only one appeared. So he says, it's unacceptable. So somehow we should try to do that with other departments as well to speed up our filling of the vacancies. And so I think we're taking too long. And a lot of the interviews we've had with our own agencies that we're responsible for, they're saying, we can't fill it. I mean, don't care. Our WAM has been we've filled and approved all the vacancies this past year. And we need to have them moving out into the communities. But everything is so slow. So somehow we have to speed up filling the vacancies, but also make sure that we communicate with the departments so that they can have an input as to, you know what, we need these guys right away. So wherever it is, but somehow we're taking too long.
So your question is, Senator,
Speeding up the
speed up the,
vacancy
can
and
you
working
speed
with
up?
the agencies.
No, I
Because
guess the question should be why? Are these people
Yeah.
working from home, so they're not
Well-
in to make appointments?
But anyway, speed up the process. But for those, agencies, they're waiting too long by the time they got the names from you folks.
So again, it goes
Okay.
back to what is that process and where is it so that we can speed up
Yeah.
the 6-month delay?
There are lots of different approaches that we can take to try to speed up the process. Right now, one of the challenges is we do a big recruitment, but it takes us too long to screen the applications. Perhaps if we did smaller recruitments, took only, say, 30 or 40 applications, something that we could move within 2 weeks, because my preference is that we get back to applicants within 2 weeks. I think that's sort of the sweet spot that we need to be working toward. If we can reach back out to the applicants within 2 weeks, then I think we keep them connected and engaged and interested. But if we take any longer than that, we tend to lose them. So we need to change our own internal processes so that we can do more recruitments more frequently, but something that we can manage more quickly.
And give the departments some choices of names rather than just one name and you got 14 applications.
So
Give them 5 or something.
you've seen how effective WikiWiki Hire is, and you say even expand it to the other departments, but some departments don't want to take it on. Are you doing any training of the HR people in the department so that there's less resistance to taking on that responsibility, if it in fact can be delegated to all the departments so that they can help their managers hire faster?
Yes, so the Departmental Human Resources officers from every department meet monthly. I was a part of that group and the chair and the co-chair for many years. Those are my colleagues. And so I've made a commitment to all of them to be more communicative with them, to be more collaborative. So I'll be at each and every one of those monthly meetings so that we can together work towards making recruitment better, faster, more efficient.
So why is it that the WikiWiki Hire was only accepted by a couple of departments and not across the board? What is the problem with their accepting that, I guess, responsibility?
It requires more resources, more time for them. I don't know specifically, but I'm certainly interested in exploring that with them.
Can it be streamlined?
That's why they don't like film. But it is. It's a slush spot, just like the university.
But is there any way of streamlining it or using, your computer system to NeoGov or whatever, to make it easier for the departments to do it?
Perhaps.
Because basically we want to reduce that time.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's part of the key to filling our vacancies is being more responsive to applicants.
I think you'd have to look at your process too, the time schedule within your own staffing as to the procedures, because some would say, well, I got 60 days to do this particular program. Or 30 days or something like that. But I think if we could cut back and do a speedy process.
Thank you, Chair. Brenna, can you give us, you don't have to give it now, but check your overtime use. And particularly, you know, compare it with previous years. And then the overtime use for those that are teleworking also.
Certainly.
Can
I
can I
believe that's-
follow up on her question? Looking at table 13, you're projecting for FY 23 overtime to go up a bit for HRD 102. I assume this again refers back to your presentation that you have a bunch of vacancies, because I see that FY 24 you are projecting that the overtime will be much less. But my question goes back to my earlier question, how long will it take you to fill? Because you do project higher overtime in FY 23 across all your divisions.
Yeah, it's a minimal amount, but we do have, you know, for example, to meet the needs of the staffing in the staffing area, the recruitment, there is from time to time a need for overtime. I understand that prior to my coming to the department, that staff was working overtime it was about 20 hours per pay period. That has since stopped. It stopped before I arrived, and we'll have to assess moving forward whether it's needed. I tend to use overtime very sparingly because, you know, we don't want to burn out our employees. We want them to continue to be productive during their regular workday. So I don't anticipate that that we'll be using much overtime if we're able to fill our positions as we intend.
Thank you.
Shift gears to where I see the biggest expense in your department, which is the workers' comp claims. And you oversee that. I'm just wondering whether you have any mechanism to oversee that. I'm like telework, but oversee that in terms of worker injury prevention, or is anybody looking at what the injury rate or claims rate are across the departments, and where do we have the biggest problems, and what are we doing about prevention?
Can I follow up with that question?
Yeah, sure.
So, and that goes to the teleworking. So do you take claims for people who get hurt in their own home that are teleworking?
I believe we do, whether it occurs often or not, I'm not certain. I'm going to ask Jennifer Mori-Kilby, who is the administrator of our employee claims division, to speak to that specific issue.
Hi, how are you guys doing? For your first question about monitoring, yes, we have a safety area that monitors where injuries occur, and they are responsible to go out to the different work sites to assess how we can put in new, whether it's ergonomics or certain features to make the area safer. We do depend on departments to execute it thereafter, so we are just putting in reports and recommendations. For your question about telework, by statute, because the person is working, if they do get injured at home, we do have to accept the claim. That does not mean we are going to approve the claim. That just means somebody can file a claim to say they got injured. Going for the budget situation overall though, we can show numbers that the number of claims that have come in are reduced, meaning the amount of people who are filing injuries and accepting have reduced over the years. Costs have increased just because of life. I mean, when we take what we call the average weekly wage for workers' compensation, this year it's at $1,090, meaning that's the max someone could get paid weekly, versus last year it was $100 less. And these types of calculations are what's used when we have to pay out for permanent partial disability, when the person has a permanent restriction, when somebody's kept off work. So even that for workers' compensation, costs will increase every time we try to battle certain things. So there are physicians who sometimes keep people out for a long period of time. The only recourse we have to I guess, counter this is to send people to what's called independent medical evaluations. These evaluations can cost the state anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a piece. With that information, we use it to stop treatment as best as possible. But there are decisions that were made at the Supreme Court that if we stop treatment, employees have the right to take us to hearings. At the hearing, we might be overruled, which either will incur more costs where we can appeal it and we have to have counsel, or we have to, most times we'll just go along with continued treatment. And when you keep compounding treatment after treatment, it can increase the cost over time. Overall, just the laws have changed. Costs for treatment, the type of treatment have increased. There's things that physicians do now call physician dispense medication, which is different from them going to long pick up medication. So those things don't have caps on them. So we are responsible for all these extra fees and costs.
But do you keep stats across the departments of how many injuries or how many people injured and the cost per department? Because it seems like anything else, like energy efficiency, if you start making the departments have to pay for their claims, then they're much more aware of how they prevent these injuries from happening. So if they can get some report, or do you report back to the department saying, you've got these kinds of claims, what are you doing about prevention? Or,
Yes.
Doing some consultation with them. Who does that?
We do. We run the numbers, we run queries. I mean,
Can we get a copy of that report that you give to the departments to see across the board, what kind of injuries, what kind of claims by department, so we know?
yes,
Each
we
year.
can give you the generic one that just shows the injuries for, the positions, but we can break it down for department.
Yeah. Because it would be good to know where the injuries are happening, what kinds of claims you're getting in, so that you
Yes.
can prevent it. So we don't have these high costs with the claims.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're self-insured in the workers' comp situation, right? As a
Yes.
state. So can you at least give us a comparison over the last 4 years on what the amount of the claims? Because I guess you're asking for, I just want to get a sense of, you're asking for 4 million or so in FY 24. How much are we paying in FY 23?
I'm sorry.
How much is budgeted in FY 23?
So technically, FY 23, we were budgeted about $10 million, and we had to ask for ARPA funds.
Okay,
So
so we're looking at 14.
yeah, so what has happened progressively is we've been asking for $10 million, but borrowing against cases like ARPA. Or we would, what is the word? We would encumber. We would have money encumbering from the years before. So we would keep passing it over. With things like COVID, believe it or not, it increased our costs. And so there's this big gap now, because if you ask for just $10 million over the last 5 years, and costs went up, it does seem like a lot.
Okay, so the acceleration of 4 million for next year and then next fiscal year and 5.2 in the year following, do you anticipate it'll be stable after that at 15 million or so, or are you?
We always hope, but it is dependent on factors we cannot control. For example, we don't control what the average weekly wage is. We cannot control decisions that come out of the Department of Labor or the LAB or the courts of appeal or the Supreme Court, which then determine at the lower courts what might happen. So these are the things that have impacted us. So back in 2015, there was a bunch of decisions that came out of the Supreme Court that impacted the way workers' compensation was handled. So it basically made it more difficult for the employer to deny cases or to stop treatments. And that's what attorneys and, people use. And I mean,
There's nothing wrong with attorney.
I don't know, you guys are great people. But I mean, that's their job, right? But I mean, the laws are the laws, right? And unless we create different new laws, I mean, we are following decisions and things like that.
So the answer is we could see more accelerations.
We could, I mean, we are trying to, I mean, we scrutinize more of the cases that come in. We are trying to be more communicative with our departments on what they should be watching for. They shouldn't just be putting any types of claims in. We talk to the employees more on things that they can, do to help themselves to get better quicker. So small steps we've been taking to try and on our own fix the processes that we have internally.
Okay, thank you.
So have we had any telework claims?
We have had a very small number. I want to say, I can run numbers and I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it's probably less than 20.
What's the dollar amount and cost?
They normally don't have many. It's just medical, but I can run it for you.
Do you have any information on what other states do they allow claims from telework? I know you said it's in statutes, but statutes can be changed if.
No, we never ran, because it's not an area that is a problem for us. Actually, the people who show up to work.
That's all I.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Kim.
I just want to follow up now on that or something else, but when you consider a problem, if it's only 20 cases, that's not a problem?
Well, when you take someplace big like public safety, which has the largest number of injured employees, I mean, for us, and they have the highest costs, that's who we focus on and trying to bring down the numbers as fast as
But
possible.
if they're teleworking and they're at home, I'm not sure if they're fixing the roof or putting up Christmas lights or doing something and they get hurt and they claim that it's, work related. I mean, so those things should be discouraged or should not be happening, right?
Yes.
So if you're not going to check on it or you're not going to make it a priority, then people will do it more and more and it will become a problem. So
Yes.
you're going to have to nip it in the bud. The other thing I wanted to raise is while we were at the DOE, they did share with us that in negotiations, that in a workers' comp case, they can only require their own doctor or physician to review the patient only once. And so if somebody's on workers' comp for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they can't go back in the third year and say, we'd like this patient to be reviewed or re-looked at, because that was negotiated that the employer only has one time. Is that correct?
I cannot speak on behalf of DOE. We are separate from them.
Okay, but do we have
the
those?
law? No. So the law supports insurance carriers trying to get independent medical evaluation. It is not mandated for the employee to have to go. They can elect not to go. So we have to, if we wanted to go, ask for an order from the Department of Labor. But there is no rule saying we cannot ask for an order or ask an employee to go to multiple independent evaluations within a year, within 2 years.
Okay, so the DOE is under a different negotiated contract.
We follow statutory law. I cannot, again, speak on behalf of them. I don't know what they're talking about, because there is no, at least for us, contract that requires us to only send the employee to an independent doctor once.
Okay, well, I would hope that since you're all under the governor and there is a cabinet, that you folks communicate and find out, because if they're negotiating a certain kind of benefit or requirement, that eventually all unions want the same parity. And then it becomes prevalent that those are the kinds of things that are being negotiated. So I hope that you folks will know what other departments within the state, what kind of, workers' comp requirements are being negotiated individually with the different entities, state entities, like DOE.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
I know you don't cover DOE, and HSSC, but when they come before us, can we anticipate that they're gonna be asking for comparable increases in workers' comp? Are they self-insured, or are some of those other entities, are they
So
not
it
self-insured?
just depends, like DOE is set up more like us, where they have adjusters on site and they manage the claims, whereas the University of Hawaii, they go through a third party. So the third party, like a HEMET, manages the claims for them, but they have staff who are working with them for personnel reasons. For HSHC, they too have third party adjusters who handle their claims. I cannot speak on behalf of how many claims they have and if their costs will go increase. I can say for our executive branch, it does increase with simple things like if we're short staffed, if people are asked to work more hours, the probability is an injury is going to occur versus not. You know, like in the prisons, and again, I don't know for them what types of workers they have. Like for DOE, I don't know if they have issues with teachers not being there and if they have to work more hours. But it's statistically nationwide. Like when you work in certain industries, you have shortages, the probability is that injury rate will increase.
Senator Favela.
Yes, you guys help out with recruiting and helping out adult corrections at the prison? You guys do that?
Our department?
Yeah, do you guys help them fill the positions that they're vacant?
Yes.
Okay, the reason why I bring this up, so now, we have some of them already working 72 hours straight, nobody addressing this, and nobody seems to think it's a concern. But right now, on top of this, correction officers are speaking up because the academy is 8.5 weeks long. Too long. Why they don't go back to how the correction officers was requesting long time. You like work there, you come and you train within them. You don't do the hard side, but you learn. But these guys go 8.5 weeks of training, and then they find out they're going Alava or OCCC. Not too many people want to go OCCC. So guess what happened? It quit. See, like how in HPD was getting, or people was getting stolen from out of state to give them more money. They should be penalized. If you come and you apply and we train you for that 8 weeks and you quit, you gotta pay back to the department. But then we're not gonna have that. It's just like how right now we're having problems with workman's comp. We have a chair in Halawa prison. They call them the mystery chair. Because everybody falls off that chair and they're on industrial. So what I like you guys do, if you guys can, when the next time you guys come back, maybe we can ask this in the subject matter committee. I heard there's guys at the adult correction office been out for 20 years on industrial. 20 years. I'm just referring to what they're telling here. So how can you guys streamline them so that they can get the help? So I've been here 4 years now. 4 years, nothing would happen. Interviews, inspections, TV news, talk to the directors, the wardens, everything. Nothing. Gotta change the whole mentality of the prison system and our jail system. And it starts with recruitment. Because if you take too long, nobody likes the job. We cannot get police, we cannot get sheriffs, and we cannot get prison guards. Correction officers. Because what happens, by the time they get all of this done, they leave.
Okay,
It
so
takes too long.
maybe you can meet with the public safety director.
I have.
No, about this.
Oh, about this, yes, okay.
And then
sure.
see what you guys can come up with and then get back to the committee and Senator Favela if there's any way we can try to address that concern.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
What I wanted to ask was, under the previous director, we had started an office assistance pathway program. Anybody familiar from your guys' staff? Yeah.
Are we done with workers' comp? I just want to make sure. Thank you.
So Corey Dido is a supervisor in our employee staffing division.
So we tried to work with the Department of Labor at the time and DHERD because we know office assistant has a huge number of vacancies, but there's no pathway. So we tried to work with DOE. We funded additional I think positions, some tuition money. They worked with 2 high schools, Leleho High School and Waipahu High School, so that we could get high school students to get the necessary training so that when they graduate, they could become a state employee and an office assistant. And there seemed to be some traction on that, and then we had COVID. And so I'm hoping that we can start that again.
We do have an examiner that does do the outreach for that. She has done during COVID, she actually did teams with the Hawai'i High School. And then we did open up an office assistant too, in order to have them be applied.
Okay, because we're trying to connect all the dots. I mean, last year we had put 230 positions in for internships at Department of Labor. So as we start to do these cradle to grave pathway positions, I'm not sure what UH is doing in the P20. So the legislature is trying to piece it all together, where we're connecting DOE, community college, Department of Labor, DHERD, so that we can get our high school students who graduate who don't decide to go to a four-year campus in the workforce. The other thing that we want to try to do, and I asked the previous director, so hopefully you can do this, is look at the positions statewide that no longer need the bachelor's as a starting point. Maybe it should just be a CTE certificate or an AA as a starting point. As an example, Department of Ag has certain positions have a minimum requirement of a bachelor's degree. So I'm a journalism major, but that qualifies me versus a CTE or an AA in Ag being qualified at Department of Ag. So I would hope that if you can just take a look at that, so we can look at the positions where it makes sense to change the minimum requirements for education to more of a CTE or AA pathway versus the bachelor's. And then we can work with Department of Labor in making sure that when they get the CTE, AA, they get the 1-year paid work experience, because we're paying for those internships, which should hopefully qualify them to work in a department or in the private sector.
Okay.
But that's one way we're going to be able to fill our vacancies, is to focus on the students in Hawaii that want to live here. They're not going to a four-year campus, but we can get them early.
Absolutely. That's part of our
So-
plan.
Well, that's our plan that you're going to implement. So if you can give me or give the committee some report at some point as to what we have to do to get the office assistant pathway program either expanded, re-energized, refocused, whatever it takes, so that we can fill the needs. I mean, it helps all of Hawaii by doing this. The other thing I wanted to ask, so that's unless anybody else has questions about that. No, so then, because the Department of Education and the Education Committee, they're looking at all these, what do you call them? Not specialized schools, but academies. And so I think the superintendent is, if there's a pool of a workforce, he'll establish an academy so that we can have a pathway. And then talking to community colleges, they're also more open to it, but they got to know that there's a job at the end. Isn't that you're educating people, then there's no job, which a lot of our degrees are like that. So we need to work backwards. Okay, I wanted to ask about, hopefully you may not be prepared for this, but in one of the audit reports from October, I wanted to follow up if the department is in compliance with reporting annual cost element for each non-general fund account.
I don't know the answer to that question. I'll
Okay,
have,
page 14, later on you can, page 14 in the audit, October 22nd, report number 22-12. And then in the same audit, on page 16, the previous director indicated the department would be taking steps to reclassify DHERD's fund accounts identified by the auditor. What's the status of the reclassification?
I'll need to check on that with
Okay.
you. I mentioned earlier that our ASO retired, so it's a little challenging at the moment, but
Okay, thank
we'll
you.
get back to you.
I want to go back to recruitment classification, and I see in your table 14 on their contracts that you have only $248,000 for NeoGov. I don't know if what you're paying for, if it's going to expedite the process. But again, if you're going to be trying to modernize your IT program and connection with the departments are essential. And so I'm just wondering what is that paying for? And does that cover the full range of, classification, examination, compensation, all of that stuff to get people hired?
Okay, so we use NeoGov right now as our recruitment application. So when an applicant applies for a state job, they're using NeoGov. That's where their application resides. It's used by many public sector employers. So an individual can create a profile and then they can tap into that profile and apply for many jobs using that NeoGov application. So we use it for recruitment. We also use it for onboarding currently. So once you're hired, then those departments that are using NeoGov onboarding would be able to send that individual a link and they can complete all of their new hire paperwork using NeoGov.
So has
Those are the
that
two primary
reduced the
reasons now.
time frame for recruitment or not? So it's
believe so.
a connection with
we've
the
actually been-
employee and the department. too.
We've actually been using NeoGov for almost maybe more than 15 years. So it's been our platform, recruitment platform for a very long time.
And what about classification?
So classification, we don't have an online, but Renelle and her team have actually been moving a lot of their content to a SharePoint site recently, which is accessible by the departments. So they have all of their position descriptions and tutorials and training and other reference materials all residing on a SharePoint site.
So and that's all included in whatever your system is right now.
Yes, we would like to use either NeoGov or another similar type platform to move. I mentioned earlier about performance appraisals. I think that's a good place to start with modernization, is to make transition from that entirely paper-driven process. We print about four to 6 pages of paper for every state employee every year to do their performance evaluation, when we could have an electronic solution such as NeoGov. There's actually several software as a service providers that could automate that process.
So under the purview of this committee is information technology, and last session we passed out a working group of all the departments so that there is some consolidation, some support for IT across the board, so there's more consistent application. Have you been involved, or whoever in your department is an IT person, been involved, and how does that relate to the kinds of technology that you have now in force?
I don't know who's our current point of contact. It could be Dave DeKeen, who is our IT manager. He's a shop of one. We have only one person to do entire IT for our entire department. I do know we had some resources allocated last session to modernize our employee claims management process. Right now, Jennifer's team is doing everything manually. They log everything manually, which is not a good use of their time.
So could we have a report back on what you are doing with IT and who's in charge and who's going to these working groups that the OETS is supposedly having meetings on how we support IT across the board in a more consistent way?
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to recess so that we can have Department of Labor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, reconvening the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and Labor and Technology. So we'll be hearing from the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, who will be presenting their biennium budget requests. Good morning.
Honorable Chair De La Cruz, Chair Moriwaki, nice to see you looking well rested. Vice Chair Kit Agaran, and honorable members of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means and Labor and Technology. Good morning, Happy New Year, and thank you for the opportunity to present the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations Fiscal Biennium Budget Request for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. We strongly support the executive budget, and we respectfully request for your support to fully fund the LIR's budget. I'm proud of the tireless work being done by all of our employees who are serving the state each and every day, as their work is critical to our economy, our communities, and our families. With me, who have all the answers, and please stand up when I call your name. Bill Kunzman is the Deputy Director. Someone who is extremely familiar to all of you, David Rodriguez, is the Legislative Coordinator and Equal Opportunity Officer. B. Payton, she's our Administrative Services Officer. Francis Kagawa, Fiscal Officer. Kim Nguyen, she's the Human Resources Officer. From our Workforce Development Division, Maricar Pilutin Freitas, she's the Administrator. And also from our WDD, Jay Ishibashi is the Job Program Specialist. From our Occupational Safety and Health Division, Norman Ahu, Administrator. From our Wage Standards, Cheryl Lee, Administrator. And Mary Imamura, she's the Labor Law Specialist. From our Unemployment Insurance Division, she's my predecessor, Ann Pereira Eustachio, Administrator. And from our Disability Compensation Division, Joanne Bidinhar, Administrator. And Broyden Coito, Program Support Chief. From our Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, Bill Hoshijo, Executive Director. And Marcus Kawatachi, Deputy Executive Director. From our Hawaii Labor Relations Board, Midori Hirai, Hearings Officer. From our Labor and Industrial Relations Appeals Board, Damian Elefante, Chair. From our Office of Community Services, Giovanni De La Cruz, Administrator. And last but not least, from the State Fire Council, Gary Lum, Administrative Specialist. You have our testimony, and I know you've had a long hearing already, so I won't read it except highlight our budget requests. Given the nature of the population who depend on DLIR, you're talking unemployed, dislocated workers, temporarily disabled, economically disadvantaged, immigrants, and even refugees. We're the tip of the spear on taking care of people. As such, we want DLIR to be the department that residents can count on in their time of need. Our current proposed budget additions formulated under the previous administration are modest and essentially reflect housekeeping for positions and programs authorized by the 2022 legislature. Full year funding for 5 positions in OCS to help with the GIA and CIP programs. These are filled positions currently processing the GIAs and CIPs. Similarly, full year funding for an office assistant in the Wage Standards Division. Lastly, continued funding for the Immigrant Resource Center program currently funded by Act 256 and passed by the 2022 legislature. The department is currently formulating additional requests pursuant to the instructions from Budget and Finance for consideration in the GM for new requests from the Grant Administration. These requests include funding for the Unemployment Insurance Division's modernization of the UI program to ensure the UI program can effectively operate in the long run and capable of handling future crisis. An RFP process is currently underway, and we expect to issue that RFP in February or March for the project, and awarding the project during late summer, early fall during fiscal year 24. Previous legislatures appropriated funds, and more recently, Governor Ige allocated $42 million for the project. But we estimate the total for the complete project may be around $70 million. In the meantime, federal UI administration and grant funding has supported stabilizing and hardening the existing applications on the mainframe to ensure the current system continues to function until a fully modernized system is implemented. We have to build the car while riding in it. The expanded scope of the project will include benefit and tax appeals, a robust fraud component, additional capacity to service limited English proficiency persons, and other technology improvements that will serve the state over the long term and be capable of handling future crises. As I mentioned, we're still in the process of formulating additional requests for submittal to PNF. And at the appropriate time, we will certainly be available for discussions of those items with the chair and committee members. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jay. I do have a couple of questions, just focusing in on UI. Your testimony indicates that it's going from a 22% unemployment rate to a 3%. What is the impact on that, and how does it impact both the division and your department in terms of funding and resources? I don't know if you just get rid of all those positions. What happens if the pandemic comes back again and we go up? What are you doing about that?
Well, I mean, we cannot talk about DLIR without talking UI. I mean, they're basically 60% of the department, and you know, when you as the unemployment goes down, we don't have the claims is not.
So what happens to all those positions? Are you eliminating the positions, abolishing the positions? Are you keeping it? How are you going to manage when you don't have the federal funds coming in?
We need the positions because because it takes time to establish positions. I mean, if when we get the funding and we need to fill the positions, I mean, to establish a position takes at least 2 years. You got to go through the BNF.
So are you asking for money for some positions? How are you handling that?
No, we're just keeping them in the event that when we need them, we can fill them.
But so you're keeping vacant positions, and you don't have anybody doing the work.
Let me, if you don't mind, Chair, let me ask our UI and.
So what's the impact? I mean, that's a basic question. And what positions do you still need? And does the state need to come up with funding for it?
Good morning, Chair, Vice
Morning.
Chair, and members of the committee, Ann Eustachio, Administrator of the Unemployment Insurance Division. So as you know, unemployment insurance funding is 100% in Hawaii, 100% federal funding, and it's counter-cyclical to our services that we provide to the citizens in the state of Hawaii. And so when there's a recession, workload is very high. And so funding is extremely high. And that allows us to continue to bring in additional employees if needed to carry out the function. But when workload is very low, like you said, it dropped to 3.3%. UI then has to be able to continue to function and keep at least a knowledgeable work-based staff so that we can, during times of recessions, quickly pick up and provide the services required for the safety net of those in the state. That's our problem. That's the issue. And so federal funding has declined drastically. We were very fortunate that all of you, the legislators, provide us with ARPA funding to continue to operate during the pandemic. We do still have some of that ARPA funding available for us to continue to operate for at least to the end of 2025. That will hopefully allow us to continue to work on workload. But I think the most important part of that is that during times of good times, when unemployment is low, that's the time where we're supposed to work to better the system. And that's where modernization comes in. And if we let go all of the staff and we don't have the staff to help us through this new modernized period and solidify what we have in place, as well as improve our applications, we won't be able to do that with this decline in staff.
So what is the number of employees and the expertise of the employees that you need to continue during this time of not getting the federal funds that the state maybe needs to be supported?
So the way unemployment insurance works is we have a lot of positions, so we don't have to ask for positions, but because it's cyclical, sometimes we have a lot of vacancies and sometimes we don't. One thing you can be assured of on the unemployment side is we're not filling because we want to keep the money or use it for something else, because it's federal funding and they pay us on workload. So we don't have additional funding to be able to do those kinds of things. So we really need to keep the base that we have now, Senator.
So is it in addition to what is there? How many more do you need?
We don't need any
Money.
additional positions.
Not positions, but money.
Money, I think we can survive to the end of 2025, state fiscal year 2025, with the ARPA funding that we received in the last legislative sessions. But eventually, yes, we would need money.
Okay, post 2025, what are we talking about?
So
if we don't go up again, but if it stays like at this level, what is that amount?
I would say on a monthly basis, unemployment insurance with just our regular base funding, we spend about close to $1 million a month on PSPB. And so personal services, personal benefits, since we are a federally funded agency, we have to reimburse the state for fringe benefits. And fringe benefits are at 61 or 62% right now. So our budget has to also cover 100% of the fringe benefits that we pay out because we reimburse the state for those fringe benefits. And so I would say our federal budget for the last federal fiscal year, which ended September 2022, it was $14 million. In the middle of the budget, they cut our budget by $2 million because they just didn't have the funds. U.S. Department of Labor didn't have the funds to allot to the states, even though we were promised that funding throughout the year. And so they cut our funds. Our funds were cut drastically. This new federal fiscal year, our budget is now back up at $14 million again. That's for PSPB as well as MPS. If our PSPB spending is almost $1 million a month, and we're only receive $14 million, that means we only have a couple million for NPS. That's running the application, paying our contractors to oversee our application with the M&O for those applications. We reimburse ETS because we are a federal agency. We reimburse them for all services on the mainframe. So we're not like any other state agency where the services we receive from other state agencies or from ETS is free to us. We have to reimburse ETS for their services, as well as such as rent. We are in a state building, but since we are a federal agency, we also pay back the state for rent, for being housed in a state agency. So there's many expenditures that we have to incur over and above a regular state agency.
So can we get an accounting of what these other expenses are
Yes,
in
most
addition
definitely.
to the personnel? And it's covered through 2025, even with the 2 million, are you covering the rent and your whatever other?
So we do have the
non-personal
extra
expenses?
funds from the ARPA that we received, or the CARES Act, from the legislators. And we are definitely using those funds to the best of our ability to pay for the expenditures that are incurred that aren't covered by federal funding.
Since you're here, the modernization, because IT is, I mean, that was the biggest problem during the pandemic. Where are we on that? And I see that you have some funds that went to the contractor. Is that sufficient? I know that the director said that you need 70 million, not the 40 million. Can you give us a little more descriptive analysis of that?
Right. So first of all, we are working on hardening and stabilizing the current application, not just the mainframe, but also our upfront web applications. We funded that with federal funding we received from U.S. Department of Labor. 2.8 million was used to pay a contractor to harden and stabilize the upfront web applications that claimants use to log on to our site. And we also expended 2.6 million on an MOA with ETS to harden and stabilize the mainframe. That doesn't mean that if another pandemic hits or another disaster occurs that we will be out of the woods. I can tell you, if another disaster hits, we will be in the same situation we were when the pandemic hit, except that our system will be a little bit more stabilized and we won't have to worry about it crashing. But our processes are still the same. We're still on the mainframe, and our applications have not changed any. That's where modernization comes in. We need to modernize our systems for us to be able to efficiently handle the load we received during a pandemic or any disaster at that magnitude. And so we received 41.28 million from the governor through an allotment through the CARES Act as well. He provided us with that last year, and we are utilizing those funds right now to help us write an RFP. We hired NASWA, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, to help us with an RFP. We hope to have that RFP ready for posting either at the end of February or sometime in March. And once that posting is online and vendors start to submit proposals, and we select a vendor, I could not sign a contract to choose a vendor if I don't have the funds available to cover the contract amount. And we've been visiting states and working with NASWA on what these modernized systems cost. You know, what's the rationale behind them? What does it take to modernize unemployment insurance, a full-scale unemployment insurance system? And we are looking at a price tag that looks like closer to $70 million. And we are one of the states who have taken steps to modernize. Some have already modernized, and that's where we're getting a lot of information from, as well as vendors out there who are willing to modernize unemployment insurance programs.
So you need the appropriation now for even going out for this modernization. This is the biggest piece that you need.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that time frame for that contract would actually, when will it actually work?
Right. So if we do post in February or March, we plan to select a vendor sometime at the end of the year. Once we go through all the processes of scoring and selection and best and final offers, and then we'll know what the cost of that application will be. And at that time, in order for us to accept a proposal and sign a contract, I'll have to make sure we have the funds to be able to do that.
So how do you derive the 70 million then?
That was working with NASWA, which is the National
So that's
Association.
kind of what the
Mhm.
going rate.
That's like the average that other states. And it really, there's a little impact on how big your state is, but the impact's really not that great because a UI application is a UI application, whether you have 10,000 claimants or 100,000 claimants.
So do you have figures for what the state's share would be post 2025, or I guess immediately now for the modernization IT program, but also post 2025, what kind of staffing is required and where the state can make sure that you don't go down?
Yes, I can provide that to the committee.
And then the other non-personal expenses, what that is that the state can look at
Okay,
in terms of supporting the program, so it's ready for the next
Right.
pandemic.
we have that information so that we can get that to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Any more questions? Yeah.
As long as you are still up here. I noticed in the director's testimony, we are going to go to contribution rate schedule F for this calendar year. I think the legislature artificially reduced the rate to B for the student.
Correct,
And during the pandemic and before that, we're at schedule C.
correct.
So, given the current situation and what it's being predicted, what do you anticipate will be the probable contribution rates for 24, 25, 26?
So we are asking the Research and Statistics Office to run additional estimates. But what we had looked with the numbers we looked at earlier, if we're at F now, every year, this rate is supposed to drop by one schedule. As long as unemployment insurance stays the same and we don't go into a recession. So if there's a recession and the unemployment insurance rate,
But you're talking about recession here as opposed to the main.
correct,
because
correct.
The economists are suggesting that we will not be hit with the same kind of recession.
As the mainland does, right? And so if we stay stabilized here, Senator, we should see a drop
And
in
we could
the,
be at C again. in
We
2
could.
years.
yes,
So just for my information, I know that the rate is if you have a good history, it's between 1.2 and 4%. If you have negative history, then it's 4.4 to 6.2. So what can our businesses on average be expecting the rate to reach?
yeah. So majority of the employers here in Hawaii fall above the new employer rate. And so they're in a better place than majority of the employers are in a better place
Okay.
with this rate.
But new businesses are going to have 4%.
Yeah. New businesses get the new employer rate, whether, because they weren't in
If they're
business.
gonna start a business, maybe we should come back.
Back when the rate schedule is lower.
As far as the health of the fund, is F gonna be enough? I mean, that's what's been calculated.
Yes,
so-
that's what we determined, that if we went lower, if we had, with the estimates we used for the new act that brought it down to F, if we
So
had,
right on the D.
yeah, that's right. If we went to a range, that range, we would not even be able to pay benefits at this 3.3% rate now.
Okay.
Right now, there's $212 million in the trust fund. We were at almost 600 million in the trust fund prior to the pandemic. So we're slowly creeping up there and we're getting there.
Okay, well, we're not in danger of losing federal subsidy.
No, we are not close to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, UI questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank
Sorry.
you. No,
Senator
hi,
Moore.
Ann. Thank you for being here. So about a question, at the Molokai office, the individual that works there is a single position that covers both workforce and unemployment. I heard you talk about fringe benefits. How come that position wasn't converted into a permanent position with benefits and it's just an exempt position?
So I don't believe it's an exempt position. It is a WDD position. That position is funded UI reimburses WD for some of the expenditures for that position. It may be an NTE, is that correct? Not to exceed. So what happens is that position is a permanent position, but there is a time frame for that position. And that time frame normally gets extended right before the ending of that not to exceed period.
So I know our challenges is actually keeping somebody there permanently. I also know that position does work for Big Island and Maui. So you guys have that position all over the place, and our challenges is to get them and the people that live there support and help. Is there a consideration to make that a civil service only because, you know, just to fill that position has been really hard? And then I know that that individual sits in a room bigger than this.
Yes. That's the
And the
problem
rent.
too.
So is there some place else you guys looking at moving that
Yes.
individual to cut back costs there and maybe offset it on the, you know, looking at keeping them on the civil service with benefits? Fringe.
So they are on civil service, but it's an NTE. So it's just they're not to exceed. But that, you're right, they're in office. That's almost as big as this room, I think.
Maybe
And
they
it
should
was,
be working from home.
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
and we've been working to get them into another location. But that has been extremely difficult to do. I have to say that individual has been extremely beneficial.
I know she has been critical to that island.
I know that on Maui, she helps many of the individuals on Molokai and Maui because she's on the Maui, you know, that branch, right? The Maui branch.
So I spoke with the individual and she is not on the civil service, yeah.
We can look into it,
Yeah.
Senator.
If you can,
NTE, right?
yeah.
Okay, so we will look into that, Senator.
Thank you.
Yeah, but she has been very
Yeah.
good
She's
for
been
the
critical, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Molokai.
Thank you, Chair.
Before you leave, Annie, I'm just looking at this table on overtime. And there's $1 million of overtime. If you get the positions, you need the overtime.
So
And then the money for the positions, you need the overtime.
let me explain the overtime to you, Senator. So the way the unemployment insurance funding works is we're 100% federally funded and we get funded on workload and time charges. And so we received funding for what we call PEUC and FPUC and PUA. There's still workload on PUC, FPUC, and PUA. But if we charge our regular time charges to any of those three programs, and we do not charge it to our regular unemployment insurance program, it hinders our funding that we receive from U.S. Department of Labor, and our funding drops because it's determined on the 2 years pass on time charges and workload. And so what we're doing is we're using PUA funding as well as PEUC funding and any FPUC funding that we have. We're having staff work overtime to work on that workload so that it doesn't hinder our regular unemployment insurance budget funding.
And is that
If
A or
you
is
don't
it-
use it, you lose.
Correct.
Are we paying for that? Is that A fund? It's N, so it's all federal money.
It's all federal funding. It's not state funding at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Kidani.
I'm sorry.
No,
Senator.
I was just thinking about the Molokai situation.
Yes.
And what a waste of funds that is for somebody to have a large space
Right.
with only one desk. So isn't it possible to renovate so you can rent out, lease out the additional space and make some funds for the state?
Right. So it's not a labor space. You know, is that a state building? Yeah. So it's a state building. So we have talked with DAGs in regards to getting us a smaller space because they're the ones who go through the process of working on the lease to get us a different space because we actually pay them. You know, we reimburse for the state space. So right now, UI as well as WGD is paying the state to stay in that state space. So for us, it's very advantageous to get out of that space because we're paying an exorbitant amount for just one individual. We've been trying extremely hard, but we can't cut the services and take her out of there unless we find a space for her because those services are extremely important. And so
What if we got an extra space in the library that has just been renovated?
you would look at
transition them
anything.
into there and then rent out the other.
So Jade, can you talk to Degs, the comptroller, and see what you can do? Because we really are
Right.
looking at saving
Saving
space
space and money.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with Degs, soon.
With that, you could probably, look at another use with that, whether it's a pre-K or something. like
Right,
that.
right. That space could be
Let's
better
change it to-
utilized,
Work training for unemployed or whatever.
right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the complicated world of UI. I'm glad, she's around because it's very complex.
Any other question? I do want to talk about IT because what my other hat that we wear in this committee is information technology, and we've been looking at consolidating IT, digitizing, and so both UI and I know DCD as well has a modernization project. Can we get the status of who's working on this, and also what and who is representing the department on the OETS working group for modernizing IT? So Mark, are you or who has DCD what's happening with the modernization project, and also what's happening with the working groups?
Okay, Senator, good morning or afternoon, rather, Bill Coots,
Mhm,
Deputy
yeah.
Director. So for the task force, I had been representing the department initially, and in the recent past, we delegated that to Bennett Yap, who is our head of our EDPSO section, working on that consolidation work group. So yeah, we are participating in that.
Do you have a report on how, because you've got two major projects, the DCD and UI. I know that also workforce development. So three major programs. I don't know how you're integrating with digitization as well as consolidation. And if we can have a report of your department and how it's working with OETS, that would be very helpful to get.
Okay, yeah, we can work on that. It's really the initial early stages of that working group from back in my time of participation in it. And I do believe they're gonna submit a draft report to the legislature this year for that. And we'll continue to work on that.
And who's your IT person?
Bennett, yeah, he's our head of our EDPSO section. That's our version of.
And it's one person, or how many people working on this?
Bennett is the lead, and I think he's also delegated to two or three other people to help him participate in that, because we are taking it seriously, and it's part of the effort to try to look at that and see how efficiencies can be gained both within the department and working, because we have a lot of applications that Ann had mentioned are with UI and with DAGs, and some of those are pretty costly, as Ann had described.
So if you can get a report on what all the technology and the modernization that you have and the status and the cost, and if you need further costs, like in UI, the additional 40 million, can you give me a report on that, please?
Sure, we can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Some from OCS here, correctly?
OCS, yes. Giovanni?
I understand the governor says that the non-profit GIAs are now going to be distributed. So what's the timetable? Since most of the GIAs are coming through your office.
Yes, good morning, Chair and members, or good afternoon. We are processing them as fast as we can, Senator. The idea for us is to make sure that they are ready for a contract so that they don't lapse the 6:30 deadline. Yes, so as early as we want to be able to contract all of those already as early as May 1st, Senator, to give us to process the encumbrance. To date, we have submitted 21 draft to the AG to review the contracts. We can execute them. And the number continues to increase as we process them, Senator.
Are there any grants that have been rejected?
For the grant, we have grants that are rejected by the AG as declared unconstitutional.
And what's the basis for that?
The basis, Senator, is one is a violation of the establishment clause, and the other one is the use of public funds for private institution
Private school, private
or
school.
private
Okay,
school.
for the, can we get a list of those?
Oh, yes,
I
Senator,
guess the private students, you talk about private schools.
that is
So,
correct, Senator. Yes.
because I know that there were a number of GIAs that mentioned they were going to benefit in part expansion of preschool operations or work for preschool.
That is correct, Senator.
And so you basically, the AGs are rejecting money for a nonprofit running a preschool. Is that right?
Yes, for
The
private.
establishment clause issue is what, these are grants to churches?
That is correct, Senator.
But I think if you look at the list of contracts from the department, there are existing GIA that are for churches and temples that were approved by the AG and are right now are in effect. So I don't understand where the establishment clause issue is. If it's going to a church but not for sectarian purposes, where's the establishment clause?
For it has something to do with the nature of the project. I believe there was an AG opinion, a precedent, Senator, where not necessarily a grant to a religious organization is automatically disqualified. I think that's something to do with the nature of the project. But we will provide you the list, Senator, of those that are been disqualified by the AG.
Did the AG provide an opinion or did they advise you that
they provided an opinion, Senator.
written opinion?
The written opinion, Senator.
Can you share that opinion?
Absolutely.
You could provide that a list of the rejected GIAs and the opinion. That would be useful.
Okay.
How many total number of GIAs do you have before you, and what is the timeline? Just building on. the question.
So, the past session, awarded 188 GIAs, which comprise of 108 operating and 80 CIPs. Of the 80 CIPs, 5 has been declared unconstitutional. 30 has been transferred out to different agencies, Senator, and 45 remains at OCS.
Can you give us list the ones that were transferred out so we can follow up.
Sure, Senator, we also have that list. It has been transferred to Department of DAGS, DOH, DLNR, and DOD.
So can you give us a report of all the GIAs and where it's been transferred and the ones that Senator Keith is talking about?
I think of one specific establishment clause issue that's Trinity by the Sea. Is that one of the GIAs that?
That is correct, Senator.
So is the AG that's rejecting improvements to state property that's historic because it's being used by a church? That's what they're saying?
So let me step back, Senator, with the 5 that has been declared unconstitutional. There are 3 of the 5. We have the opinion. The 2 we are still requesting for the copy of that opinion, Senator.
Oh, okay.
Because I believe
One that you wait.
that is correct, Senator. There are those that we requested, OCS requested directly to our deputy AG, and there are those that Budget and Finance themselves requested for the opinion.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Senator.
I just wanted to follow up on the vacancy table. So you don't give a specific date, you just say 60 days from issuance of eligible list. So they're all gonna get filled within the next 2 months?
I just feel, a vacancy, we have to have a list, yeah, so, what it's saying there, when the program received the list, it would take them approximately 60 days to do the selection process, and then they can fill the position.
Okay, so they're all gonna get filled within 2 months.
If they get the list,
What do you mean if they got the list?
because,
Because you're already stating this is a list you gave us.
No, they want her to give them eligible list. They can interview.
On every position, because ED, they give you a position for that too.
You need a list for all these positions, of course.
for, some division, we have delegated class of work that we do recruitment. So, when we do recruitment, we post it and we screen application and put them on the list. And then when we post it,
Of all the position titles, all of them have to go through DHER?
no, some,
Okay, but all of them say 60 days.
when the program
So what
receiving
about
the
the ones
list,
that are not from DHER?
then if we receive, if we receive applicant, we screen them, put them on the list and we give to the program.
The ones that are not from DHER, who gives you the list?
We do the recruitment and we give the program the list.
So you do the recruitment.
We have about 30 positions that we
You
recruit.
take 60 days or can you? If it's internal recruitment, isn't that faster?
So, we can do internal recruitment and then we also post for outside to,
Okay, so you
apply.
got 2 months. Today is January what? 11. If all of those positions are not filled, because it says 60 days, they're all deleted.
No, it's not 60 days
And the
from
one,
the
so
time.
you tell me which ones are from the department internally and which ones are from DHER. I mean, DHER.
Yeah, I can tell you
Yeah,
which
so the
one.
ones that are from the department, if they're not filled within 60 days, then we're gonna cut them.
The way it's put is the
Yeah.
time 60 days from if the program received the list.
I
But
know, but you're not supposed to make us do your timeline. You're supposed to come up with a timeline and put the date of when you think you're gonna fill it.
In some of those positions, Senator, is that we use them in the event that we get the funding, then that's when we fill them. Because if we were to establish position,
These are vacant.
These are all
Yeah.
vacant and you have fun.
Yeah, it says authority to hire, yes, 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 yes. I don't see any that says no. Some of them you have 89-day hires.
yeah, we gotta correct some of this. There were some mistakes on that table, Senator, so we have to.
188 vacancies. So,
Unread.
you know, if you're gonna say up to 2 months from when, especially the ones that are internal within your department. What the chair is saying is that if you don't do it in 2 months.
No, I guess the
then-
question, this is what you, as of number 30, so. If you update this list. How many of these have been filled within that 60-day period? That you guys
Yeah,
have listed?
This document says November 30. So 60 days is coming up already. So at least the ones internally you should have filled or close to it.
yeah, we can update them.
Yeah, we can update, but sometimes even if you post and you don't get any qualified candidates,
Tell us that, and that's fine. I mean, if you didn't have anyone in, and you didn't get anyone outside.
You're the only department that did this.
But
Yeah,
they said it would be everything by 60 days.
Yeah,
It's
everybody has a
60
date,
days
specific
issuance
date,
of-
not just.
That's the answer for all expected field date. Everybody else actually had a field date.
yeah, I mean, some of those positions like Hayash, I mean, those are hard to fill positions. I mean, because it's, you know,
Just because they're hard, that doesn't mean you don't recruit.
no, we are.
If you're not gonna
We're
go for
trying.
it, then why do we have it on the books?
Yeah. No, we're doing, you know, trying to
Because-
fill those positions.
What we don't like, and we mentioned this to every other department, is you're not gonna fill them. You're gonna use that either for your 10% reduction or with withholdings, or you're gonna use that for current expenses.
The money positions.
I mean, like I said, even when we post and nobody applies, I mean, we
Then
have.
cut the
yeah.
position. If nobody's ever gonna apply for it, then well, you don't need it. Or you change the position, you re-describe it, you give it more money, you update it. You don't just say, oh, because I'm just gonna keep hitting my head against the wall. And maybe in 10 years, somebody will fill it.
So we're trying to fill them, Senator. I mean, you know, like I said, for Hayash, those positions, those are very stiff competition.
Yeah,
because some
so
of-
that's your job to figure out what incentives, what redescription, what salary, so that you can fill it. Not just keep giving us the same thing and just give us the same excuse.
Yeah, you've got to identify your priorities, and you have lots of priorities that are the same. Lots 4, lots 3, and you know, and which ones are, you know, which are priorities that you really need to fill so that you can get the job done. And you've got to prioritize.
Well,
Actually say these are the ones that we're gonna.
I mean, if you look at table 7, Director, I know you just started this job, but it looks like the department met the restrictions in part based on delayed hiring. It seems like, I mean, if you look at table 7, so it looks like it was a strategy, I guess, for the prior administration to meet the restrictions using delay in hiring. So what you're hearing from us, though, is we don't want to see that.
Yeah.
But the other question I have is, the last administration said you had a $2 billion surplus. Why is there a restriction? I don't understand.
Yeah, let me get back with you on that, Senator.
Don't worry, I mean, the other departments that come by haven't been able to answer the question either. But I mean, we either have a real $2 billion surplus or we don't. And the public is getting the wrong information.
I have a question for whoever. In this day and age, I find that there are a lot of people out there looking for a job, but they only want to work part-time. A lot of them because they have children or they have elderly parents. So do you guys have a resource that captures all of those so that they could share a job?
Yeah, let me.
And it's not just your department, you know, this is throughout the state, I think, but I don't know anybody who does it so far.
Yeah, I don't know any other department. All I know is that every position in government, it's always a full-time and there's no part.
I understand that, Jay, but that's what I'm saying. You can't find full-time, hire 2 part-timers.
Yeah.
It's easy to split the salary and how you do the benefits. I don't know. That's something we got to look at, but you know, this is something maybe you guys can get together with.
And we have retirees that don't take the benefits, that work part-time in the ledge. And then there's another person, when we split a position, the person who needs the benefits gets the benefits, and the one who's retired, they don't get the benefits, but they still get half the salary. So, and they can come back because it's not a full-time position. So they can come back to work for the state.
Mhm. No, we can look into it, Senator.
It's something you might want to ask.
Yeah, I
the
mean, that's
cabinet
very,
meeting.
yeah. We can,
Thank you.
What are you doing about Hayash? I'm gonna change the subject, but Hayash, you know, I've heard that they need positions and they actually get. Do they have a special fund where you can, when you have penalties, it goes into a fund that then you could hire staff so that they can do more investigations or do consultations? How does your Hayash look?
Let me ask Norman Ahu to. I know that he wakes up, he gets sleep at night, not being able to fill some of his position because
So
once
tell
some
us
of our.
about what the priorities are there and what we should do in terms of being fully staffed to do the work.
Yeah, good questions. We do collect a lot of money on our citations. In fact, I think we bring in like at least 2 million a year.
So-
but it
so
goes
it's
to the
general
state
fund?
Yes, goes to the state funds. And absolutely right, we do not pay enough. We and I've had discussions with the director. Like our safety inspectors are like a BU3 unit clerical. I think we kind of discussed that before. We are trying to work on at least coming up with a shortage, something to, supplement the low pay. I think just the enforcement aspect kind of scares a lot of people away. We would certainly welcome part-time people. As Senator mentioned, all we need to do is train them. We kind of really desperate.
Do you have a plan of how many staff you need or what kind of competencies you need so that you can do the inspection or you can do the consultations so that we can help employers not be more safe in their working environments?
Right. So compensation is one of the key factors, which is we're trying to work on shortage. And we are also trying to put in recommendations like Senator De La Cruz said to, we don't want to keep going through the same vacancies over and over. We're trying to upgrade the positions, like reclassify from an SR, whatever, to a higher level. There's no way we're going to compete with the federal or private companies, but I want to show my staff that at least we're trying to, and the federal OSHA program, that at least we're trying to do something to get out of square one, which we keep going in circles on it. So, and we do have the 2 or 3 million that goes into the state fund, which would really help us if we wanted to, do something to help attract the hiring. It's a long training process, and a lot of people don't want to be the policeman that walks into an employer's site, and our penalties are high.
So if you collect $2 million in penalties and that goes into the general fund, can you show us how much you actually of that can be used for staffing? I think that you separate it out. You don't have a special fund because then, the more penalties you have, then, you would get rewarded. So they separate that, but we still need to know what kind of staffing you require. What is the comparables in terms of salary? Maybe you can work with your HR person and look at how we can fully staff, or at least staff adequately, so that we prevent injuries that we read about in the paper.
Yeah, I think if we had possible options or alternatives like that, we would certainly want to do a study to, we have benchmarks that like the federal program says we need to have at least 9 to 10 safety inspectors. 9 to 10.
How many do you have now?
We got like 4, maybe, 3 or 6 or something like that. And then because we pay so low, they come in and we hire them. They stay for a year or so. It's a revolving door. We lose them because
the last session, we gave pay differential to Shipty, AG, but if we don't read minds. So if you have a difficult time hiring and there's key critical positions that we need to make sure that the state functions, we need to know, but we can't help if we don't know but if you don't give us any information.
I would love to do that.
So provide the information.
I can tell you why you have hard time hiring for office assistant 3. It only pays $16,000.
Senator, absolutely right. We can't compete with on-site. Our OAs, we turn them out.
But you guys just don't do anything about it though.
I agree. And that's why I'm working on the shortage. I'm trying to upgrade the SR ratings. I agree
Keep
with you.
approaching it the same way, thinking that somehow
Yes, yes,
it's gonna change.
yes. I agree. That's why right now I have to.
Agree, but what you can do about it? Yeah.
But it, like Senator said, it's the money, because all we have is unlimited.
Well, even like we talked about at the last meeting with Deher, can we do, and does it have to be a bachelor's when for minimum requirements? Can we do a CTE certificate or a AA? And then with the internship that we worked on with the last director and Mary Carr and Jared, you know, you have a training mechanism that you guys fund.
Yeah, right. Because what we want to look at is, why do you need a degree? Maybe experience.
You're speaking to the choir.
Yeah.
But you gotta implement it, not.
Yeah, no,
It's not our
totally agree.
What we did, so you have an opportunity.
Right. Totally
Can
agree.
you come up with your proposal, your plan and?
Yeah, go look at your job, see what you can change, or AA or CTE.
I like that.
Thank you.
Next question. Yeah, sorry, can you have OCS come back up?
Oh.
It wasn't
Thank you.
quite finished. Let me apologize, Director. I'm obviously, I didn't read the material before. So, but I just looked at table 10 and 14. 10 of the transfers, and those 4 transfers were basically GIA, CIP GIAs to the other departments. Let me ask though, because I know that OCS has handled CIP in the past. So the transfers just because of the scale of the GIAs that we had this year? I mean, it was $20 million more than usual. Or was it, it's obviously not the nature of GIA, because you've done CIPs, you've managed CIP GIAs in the past. So is it the scale or the kind of project?
The kind of projects, Senator. The basis is, one is it more suitable for the receiving agency to administer it? Is it an ongoing project that they have contract?
Sure.
Those are the basis.
So, yeah, you know, as a policy, the legislature decided that OTS should get them all because we like the way you got them out and managed it. But for efficiency, are there certain kinds of projects that you could identify that you think we should just say the GIA will be managed by a particular department? And we, you know, we can deal with that later. We don't have to discuss it today.
Yes.
As we, because I assume, are we doing GIAs this year?
Yeah.
But it also.
Well,
It'll be about, but it'll be at the old.
so,
number, I think,
yeah,
right?
well, I like the old one. Well, what happened, Senator, kidding aside, what happened during my tenure at OCS when I was not the executive director, but I was with the GIA unit. I believe the good senator or this committee requested an assistance from OCS to do a preliminary check on whether which department should be best administer the grant, because it is and I would like to go on the record, this to the best. We are looking at the best interest of the grantee, because we don't think if it's an ongoing project, multi-year program, that we want to make sure that they are working with the familiar agency, familiar
Sure, I mean, if
processes.
you gave a grant 1 year and this is a follow-up grant, it makes sense to have the same administrator.
Precisely, yes.
But we can do that. I mean, if that might be useful.
No.
You know, on the CIP GIAs though, if a nonprofit buys land, do you put a easement or covenant or a
Precisely, Senator.
Okay.
Yes, we make sure that the contract bears a compliance to the 42F Section 103D.
No, so let's say the
that have
nonprofit goes
encumbrance.
defunct. Does the state
Yes.
get it back?
Yes, so in addition to making sure that they comply with 103D, the section 40, chapter 42F 103D section to put an encumbrance on the land, our contract, CIP contract, special conditions, paragraph 7 says that in the event that the grantee bellies up or cease to provide the public purpose that the grant was applied for, the state shall collect less the depreciation value of the property. But in my experience, at
So do we
OCS,
get the property back?
they pay us back with the amount, the grant that we
Why
provide.
can't we just take the property?
It's a process. I don't have the answer, Senator, because I have, with my 9 years in OCS,
Because
never
if
get
they're
a
defunct, how are they gonna get the money to give us back? We might as well just take
sell the
property.
property. If they sell, liquidate the property.
But then they're gonna make the profit based on the asset that we bought.
Yes. And with like what I said, Senator, we have those mechanisms in place to make sure that, but the actual collecting, I haven't had the experience to do that.
And has anybody checked on any of this? Like, let's say a nonprofit sold to somebody, do you know if that happened?
See,
How do you monitor?
See, that's also another question, a good question, Senator, is that at OCS, once the contract, the build, say a
No,
nonprofit.
but you gotta go back
build the
random
building.
at least, 5
Um,
random a year, something.
It's
If not, the
it's
state
tracking,
dollars going
yes.
out, we don't have no accountability.
That's true. That's true, Senator. Because OCS was just, once the contract is done, close the contract, provide the closing document, certificate of completion, picture of the project, we close the book, we file it.
No,
But-
but he's thinking about acquisitions, because I know we do, for like natural resources, like we contribute a certain amount. And but usually the federal government puts limitations.
Yes, and then
has that they can take over or transfer it to another similar organization. But you're thinking broadly.
Well, because I know we give nonprofits land or money to purchase land to do homeless services or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But then
But there's some-
I'm not,
And
but
then-
you gotta monitor.
yes, and that's true, Senator. I mean,
And
we
we
have to
should
go
get the
back.
land back. I mean, it's already bought.
yes,
It should be the state's land if once they cease to exist.
yes, and we put that restriction on the property. Make sure that it's
So do we have to
recorded.
legislate these new concepts, or are you guys gonna be able to do it by rules?
It will also be nice to have, a legislation say that, to make the rules, so it's a combination of, HRS and HAR.
Yeah.
To make it, I said, to put teeth on the shark.
Yeah, because I know there's health centers that we funded, there's culture and arts centers we help fund, there's
Nonprofit to
You
purchase the
don't
land.
evaluate at all. So we just give the money and it goes, walks out the door. So you don't have a process where you evaluate.
We have evaluated.
no.
No, Senator Moriwaki, with regards to your question, we do go out and monitor. We send out our guys to monitor that the building is actually there,
So you do.
Yeah, but
yes,
no,
and
but they
with
close
the
it.
purchase of a land, we file the agreement that
But that's where it ends. There's no follow-up 3 years or
Precisely.
5 years to say, okay.
For how long will they track it? How long the agency will keep the record?
To see that, the money that we gave for the purposes that we gave, that, they did
Oh,
it.
yes, precisely too. And since we're in the issue of land acquisition,
Well, we
like,
should figure out a way to protect the state interest though.
of course, by all means, Senator. And with Senator Agaran's question earlier on timeline, since we're in the issue of land acquisition, there are the grantees that are partly funded for land acquisition. So we have to make sure that they have the other source of funding, but in the event that they don't have by 6/30, 2023, then money will lapse.
Question. In regards to your contracts on table 14, page 80, you guys have a contract out there with the Molokai High School Department of Education. How are you guys handling the monitoring of that within strengthening the students' relationship through traditional and indigenous ways of farming and learning about climate change?
Is that OCS contract or someone else?
I'm not, yes.
labor
the-
in
the ones that I'm
industrial.
gonna-
Oh, yeah, no, not you. I'm sorry. The Paul, yes,
All
sorry.
right, Sam, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he doesn't monitor all the.
Yeah,
Senator, it's actually a,
Identify yourself?
yeah.
oh, sorry, Jay Ishibashi with WBB. It's actually funny that we got through the legislature, legislative initiatives through the Agriculture Workforce Advisory Board. So, that particular project we've done for 2 or 3 years. And, we get, the funding we get to them, goes to, this particular year got funding for, to expand their, taro farm. So we actually have somebody, we were gonna go out to, monitor the program. They do give us reports and see what they're doing. We talk to them over the phone. And we've gotten reports as far as, how they're doing. They've got pictures and everything else. And we do have people from here that went, instructors from here that went, and provided us back the information, what they were doing.
So I'm curious to know who is actually doing it on Molokai at the school. Is that the farm technician teacher or, and then even on your monitoring, who's doing the actual monitoring of whether it be taro or whatever on the traditional farming practices?
Yeah, so it's, I'm sorry, I forgot her first name, but her last name is Ward.
Sorry, I can barely hear you. I'm kind of
sorry.
like deaf and
Her
all.
last name is Ward. Sorry, I forgot her last name, but she goes by Kai Ward. So she's at the school, Molokai High
Oh,
School.
it's Sawyer. Is that Kai Sawyer?
I'm sorry.
Kai Sawyer?
No, Ward, Kai Ward. Yeah, so she's with the Molokai High School.
So they've expended out these funds on this contract, and is this a roving contract that you guys do?
So it's a, so it's a contract per year. So we didn't get
Annually?
funding.
It's renewed every
It's
year.
renewed, yeah.
No, so they come in with a request, and then we, the board decides, recommends if we're gonna fund it or not, so. But
But-
Molokai has
but-
been pretty successful as far as what they've been doing in the community and at the school, so that's why we.
Do you have a document
Yeah.
that shows outcomes,
Yeah.
measurable outcomes
can-
that you can provide?
Yeah, can we see that, please?
Yeah.
Okay,
Could you
Provide.
provide that for all the schools that are
Yeah.
doing similar work and?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, is there
Yeah.
somebody in the DOE that you guys work with
Yeah.
also?
We actually work directly with the school, so they provide.
You don't want to coordinate though?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, and the reason I'm asking is that the schools are going to, try to do different things like,
Academies.
the cafeterias.
Yeah.
They're gonna, instead of every school having a cafeteria.
No centralized kitchen.
They're going to centralize
Yeah.
kitchens, whatever, but they're going to need product like taro, et cetera.
Yeah.
So if they can do it at the schools, better yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but we need to know that they're successful in what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I would suggest that you get together with Randy Tanaka.
Yeah.
Who is, going to try to do this effort soon.
You just gotta make sure all of that is food safety certified.
So these grants though are funded where, from where?
It's part of the funding that the legislature, it was back in 2015 that the legislature put together, I think to Representative Nakashima.
It was the workforce. as well.
Yeah, so it's through our funding that we get through the legislature. Again, it was a legislative initiative back in 2015 that created the Agriculture Workforce Advisory Board, and then I think about a year later created the Healthcare Workforce Advisory Board. So those two boards, 2 years ago, they got funding, but the funding was.
I don't know if they're effective though,
Yeah.
because then the farmers say that they don't have succession plan, they
Mhm.
don't have enough farmers.
Yeah, it's, well,
I mean, they gotta coordinate with hopefully Department of Ag or,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know how it's all connected.
Yeah,
Seems
that's what
like
I'm
it's in
worried about.
silos.
Yeah.
It's all scattered and nobody really knows what the results are, so, the centralized kitchens. can't be success farmers, we have farmers to grow the products that we need, and especially like, the credit, which is.
These are the smaller scale, so it's what we would call mini grants. So it's all grants between 10,000 and maybe 25,000 at the most. So they're not.
Right, but what I'm getting at is that if we can coordinate this and get all the data together, then we may have other farmers that are interested in doing this as a full-time to supply our schools or hotels or whatever.
At least connect Farm
And-
Bureau.
Yeah.
Because they can be the counter, I mean, they try to talk to all different
Yeah, so
stakeholders.
the Farm Bureau actually has somebody on the board. So we do have, so the board is actually comprised of pretty much industry people and that kind of things, both the ag board and the healthcare board. So
No, I get that. I think what for us, some of us, what's the P20 or cradle to grave connection? You know, if we're investing in this, does it really result into a workforce? And meeting employer needs or hopefully new farmer needs, that they become a new farmer. I'm not sure how it's all.
Yeah, but part of it is to keep the money in Hawaii, so we grow our own, we raise our own, and we buy our own.
So, the funding that that's on that report is for this current fiscal year. So I can give you, again, we didn't get funding for the last fiscal year, but I can give you FY 21's reports.
I mean, I think that would be helpful because if the team are successful, why would we want to grant funding for the next cycle?
Yeah.
And I think this is where, CTAR should be playing one part in this because they have data,
Yeah.
And, if we're looking at farm to table and the Department of Ag working with that along DOE, the object is to get local grown food into there. So if the school is doing it, at least then we know that amount of what needs to be added to meet that criteria. And Randy Tanaka has been really good in working with that, but I was unaware of where the funding was coming on this issue. But would help us on the data,
Okay.
and who's where and what, and even on the Farm Bureau side, I know the Farm Bureau, so I kind of curious to know who's that Farm Bureau member that's sitting there on that Molokai side.
Yeah, well,
Brian's sitting on the Molokai one too.
yeah, the ag board.
Okay.
So he represents the Farm Bureau. There's somebody from CTAR. So
okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty good board. So they've been together. Again,
It just doesn't seem to be connecting dots to like next level.
Yeah.
Because I don't know one farmer that said, I went through this program and that's why I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once the money gone, it's like, oh, Paul, I'm done being part of farming. We're trying to build farmers.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, how many alumni do you have from any of that program that says, okay, because of that, it helped me get into this career?
Yeah, well, again, when it was first set up, it was the legislature wanted to see kind of like something like the P220. So get students interested.
No, that's where I feel like there's lots of duplication. So there's that, then you got Stephen Schatz, then you got Keith Hayashi with academies. Yeah, I mean, we're just funding all of these things to try to accomplish the same goal, but then there's no results that we see that people can say because of that pathway, I'm in this job.
Yeah. Okay, but
anyway, you can take it back because if not, we're just going to be talking in circles.
Thank you.
So one more question, maybe it's Marco Jade. There's this 371-17. It's called the Millennium Workforce Development Training Program. It's coordinating you with DBED. DBED is supposed to be developing all this training, economic development, new industries. Can you look into that and let me know, or send us what has been done with this? Has it been executed at all? Because it's supposed to be
It's in
to develop the workforce for the new business.
it's in there's actually.
It's in there.
Sure, let me ask Maricard to. Maricard, you have update?
Are you familiar with that?
It's the Millennium Workforce Development Training, it's on the books.
It's in the current HRS.
HRS.
Hi, Senator. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but we'll get back to you.
Please, and it's in your law. But it's DBED is supposed to be creating these programs for.
Because this is what
businesses.
you're talking about. It says that, maybe the, Department of Labor program should feed into DBED and UH and DOE.
Yeah,
But
so this would be kind of coordinating this in terms of, this one says millennium workforce, new workers coming in for businesses. So if you can look at this and see how DBED has been executing and on. But that would be
We'll
the
get back to you.
coordination of all the departments who get involved.
We'll get back to you,
Thank
Senator.
you.
Thank you.
We had caucus. Go ahead.
I don't know if we have this for, you guys, but, was told that, during COVID, adult correctional officers had,
What numbers?
its emergency pay or hazardous pay was coming and then, installed, cheap, equipment. Can you guys look into it, the hazardous pay for COVID for the ACO officers? And see how we can figure out and getting this through there since, COVID is on down here.
Yeah, we'll look into it,
Yeah, so how does it
Senator,
fit?
I would say with that, please. We'll get back with you.
Okay, so all that was done, I just didn't even know what you're telling me. All that was done, but it falls upon every department, but they're still waiting a response. From your department was allocated, and you guys been through the marketing, whatever. But it's still being held up, hazardous pay still held up by you guys.
Okay, we'll get back to you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, adjourn. Thank you.
Should have told us that earlier.